Okay, and we're recording. Hey everyone, welcome to another ESA online course. We are super excited that you're joining us tonight. This is our level 2 online judging course for ESA members. And with us tonight, we have Joe Grottola, ESA's competition director. We have David Portch, ESA's head judge and WSL priority judge. And up there in the left corner, we are stoked to have Gordon Lawson with us. Gordon is a WSL head judge and also ESA head judge. He's judged for the ESA many, many, many years. And he's got just so much experience with judging around the whole world, but especially on the East Coast. So Gordon, welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight. We can't wait to hear what you have to teach us. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you. Everybody who's on here, before I do that, I just want you to know if you have any questions throughout the webinar, feel free to send it through the Q&A on the bottom of your screen or jump on the chat. We're not going to do the raising hands and having people speak, just to keep things moving along. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you.
And first off, I'd like to say something before Gordon gets on. You're going to learn a lot tonight from Gordon. Gordon was my mentor and really brought me up through the ranks, and it really expanded my mind into judging and bringing me up the ranks. And he's a great craftsman, incredible surfer, another fellow board builder, and his knowledge of surfing is amazing. So, Gordon Lawson.
And also, I wanted to say a few words about Gordon. I first met Gordon when he was living in South Jersey as a teenager, and we shared many great sessions in our South Jersey surf spots. And, you know, I caught up with him and kept in touch over the years, and just great to have him on here doing this for the ESA. So welcome aboard, Gordon.
Well, thanks, you guys. Super honored, number one. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you for keeping the dream alive in ESA. And Joe, like, I don't even know where we go with our history. It's been so amazing. It's part of the ESA family. When I think of you and Lisa and Jennifer and everything that we did through that whole period of time, it really sculpted me as a person, as a surfer, and probably kept me involved in all this surfing, more so getting to know you guys. So I'm honored. And Dave Portch, my good friend from Virginia Beach, thank you for having me on this webinar. I call him webinar GM. Anyway, thanks for having me, and love working with you guys, and love everything that's going on right now with surfing. It's unfortunate with this whole shutdown, lockdown thing, but I feel like when things come back, it's going to be crazy. We're going to be so excited to see kids ripping. Can't wait to throw some scores. Actually, you can't even wait to get on an airplane, which is kind of weird for me to say that. So. But I'm honored. Thanks for having me, you guys. And I'm here for everybody. And, you know, if you have any questions, like Michelle said, type them in and I'll try to get to them. And we'll just try to have fun with this and keep it real simple. And kind of, I'll give you my take on what judging's about, what the criteria, and also why I like doing it and why people kind of respond to our scoring. So I'll leave it with you guys to start up.
Yeah. Hey, so Gordon, before we do get started, I wanted to just bring up, really, what got you into judging? What was the first thing like that really kind of pulled you into it? I know you told me the story, but I'd love to, you know, for you to share that.
This is a Central Florida ESA guy from back in the day, Tom Walsh. I kept losing heats, so I never really. You have to understand, when I was in the ESA in the glory days, we had the Slater brothers. We had Sean Madison. We had Ed Kane from New Jersey, Dean Randazzo. We had guys that just were world class. So I considered myself the filler. I might make a final here. I might make a couple heats. So, but I was always around the scene. I loved it. We had contests in Cocoa Beach, Florida at Patrick's Air Force Base. And in New Jersey, when I lived up there, as Joe was saying, we had contests in Cape May, Long Beach Island. So not only do you get to meet all these in this family, these friends that you meet all over the planet, but you get to surf different waves. And it really makes a good champion. And I remember going to the Outer Banks with Joe and Lisa, and years later with the Slater brothers, and surfing with everybody and just going, I'm going to be a surfer for life. So that kind of got me into this thing. I fell in love with it. Competition was everything in the 80s, and we all kind of gravitated around it. So when I'd lose a heat, next thing I knew, I'd have a clipboard in my hand and I'd be sitting with the judges. And then they're like, hey, you're pretty good at this. You want to get paid? And I'm like, you're going to pay me to do this? And so 30 years later, here we are.
And Gordon, you also got involved in surfboard design and distributing a line of boards up and down the coast, and you know, the whole aspect of that industry.
Yeah, well, I consider my life, my whole world is surf related, just like yours, Joe. We have to sometimes get another job, but we're constantly looking at the wind. We're looking at the ocean. And building surfboards is just a byproduct of surfing. You want surfboards, and you're not going to make a lot of money judging. Let's just be honest. You're going to have to love it. And I love it. And Joe loves it. And Dave and Michelle, we all love it. And that's why we're here. And sometimes you have to make your own surfboards because you can't go get a $1,000 Mayhem. So that's kind of, but yeah, everything's surf related. Surf lessons, surf school at Sebastian, judging, building boards, selling fin boxes. It's all part of the whole, the dream, as Ben Gravy calls it. We're living the dream. We really are.
That's awesome. And if you don't mind me throwing it out, you are my futures rep for futures fans and board boxes, everything. Fin boxes, yeah.
You wear a lot of hats when you're a surf guy.
That's for sure.
You know.
Yep.
We got to pay the bills, right?
That's right. That's right. Well, Gords, I guess we'll just go ahead and jump in. So let's just talk a little bit about criteria. I think that's a good start with becoming a judge. And like when you first sit down in the chair and you're going to be a part of a panel, it's really like, how do we separate this? And let's look at like what we have as a criteria and really kind of talk about what those are and break them apart for us all.
Okay, maybe now we can have Michelle bring up the sheet that has the actual criteria that we use as basically our Bible for breaking down surfing and scoring. So maybe we could bring that up now, Michelle? She's the pro tech person here. We're not. Okay, so.
Can I see it?
Yep.
Okay.
So we good to run through it now, Michelle? Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
I think this is good. Good time. Okay,
so of course, with the first thing you see is commitment and degree of difficulty. This is standard with anything. When I have people question, oh, so-and-so did an error, how come he didn't get the score? Well, just because you do a maneuver doesn't automatically give you the score. Sometimes we can break it down by, there wasn't that much commitment in the air. It was a pretty well done one, but it was easy. There wasn't that much degree of difficulty. It wasn't a heavy section. There wasn't a lot of speed going into it. So we use that commitment and degree of difficulty to really use that as a reward-based system on big maneuvers, big commitment, big sections. That's where we break it down, commitment and degree of difficulty. So that's kind of what we always lean on. Was there a lot of commitment in that section? Was that a heavy section? Was it hard to do a big turn on that section? Was it exploding whitewater? All those factors come into commitment. And then the next big thing that everyone sees that we have been really has come on in the last 20 years, and guys like Joe Grottola, we can thank for this, innovation and progressive maneuvers. So everyone skateboards. I'm not a ramp skater, half pipe skater like Dave, like Joe. I can skate. I'm more of that Carver, cruisy, cutback, Brad Gerlach style skater, where you have now the Felipe Toledos, the Gabriel Medinas, the Blair Bartons. You know, you have all these kids now that can do airs. And I'm just using him as an example because we all know him, but that's where innovation comes in. But it's not all about aerials. It's also drawing a new line, or, you know, there's turns that Jeremy Flores does that aren't considered an aerial, but it's like a nose pick revolving. They call it the club sandwich. That's a very innovative maneuver, and it's very progressive. So we have to reward those things. We can't overlook those things because that's the future, I feel like. And then combination of major maneuvers. I have every day when we're doing an event, people come up to me as a judge. What are you looking for? What are you looking for? Well, if you always go back to the criteria, we do adjust during the day sometimes, but we stick to these things. Combination of major maneuvers, one big turn. What do we say, Dave? One hammer can get you into a good range.
That's right. Yep.
Two hammers can get you in the excellent range to maybe even an 859.
Yep.
And that combination of maneuvers shows so much skill set. It shows that you can put together and link together big maneuvers, and that shows us definitely another level surfing. So we always look to that. And my favorite, of course, I'm a big sucker for an air to a tube, like a tube ride to an air section, or a big air to an air reverse finish, like those big wow jaw droppers, we call them. That's when judging's fun. That's when everyone on the beach agrees and claps and, all right, you guys got that one right, but that's easy. And then my favorite also, probably I lean more towards this part of the criteria, speed, power, and flow, because there's nothing in there that says style anymore. So I'm going to take style and I'm going to feed it into this part of the criteria for me, because you'll have people that come up and they go, hey, I had that big turn. And I'm like, yeah, but you didn't really have any flow. It was really fractured, or the section didn't offer the flow. And so we use all these key points to really lock down, and not only to argument our scores. We don't want to argue every score, but we fall back on this as kind of like our standard. And I hope everyone can kind of understand that. If there's any questions on any of this criteria and what we look for, I mean, I think it's pretty basic now. And if you watch the WSL, and we kind of all use that as our holy grail. So when we're watching the WSL and they're giving Felipe Toledo a 10 for 2 major alley-oops at a point break, then we know that's kind of where it's going. And you see Italo Ferreira, our world champion now, is doing airs on just amazing airs. It's just crazy. But he uses all these. He's landed with flow into the next turn, into the next turn. So that's where we base everything.
Awesome. And sometimes let's go back to like innovative and progressive maneuvers. So Gord's one thing, like we've talked about too, is, you can have somebody come in and do 3 turns, maybe they're mid-face, etc. But then we have one person that just lays into this big bottom turn and squares off right in the pocket and just releases fins. So the other score could be like a 4 or 5, but they're coming in at maybe like a 7 or 7.5 for one maneuver. And does that, for you, is that kind of flow into the innovative and progressive maneuvers area, And how do we use these criterias in certain conditions? For example, sometimes in smaller waves, we might be weighing a little bit on this because maybe speed, power, and some flow, because a smaller wave is not providing that pocket, that steep face. Is this part of the criteria for you and how you look at that?
Well, when we do these events, and we have one thing that I think is really important, and you know this, Dave, we'd like to get down to the beach early and watch things.
Yeah. We
sort of set our scale on the first waves in the morning. And I've always said from the WSL events I did that Jordy has won, that CJ Hobgood's won back in the day. They're the guys, Dane Reynolds, they're the guys that look best in the morning at that 6:45, 7 a.m. You see that first wave and you're like, whoa. And not only do you see the potential, that sticks in your head. So hope that answers some of your question, but to go back on what you were saying about, we get this a lot. I did like 5 turns. He only did 1, but he got a better score. So I think it doesn't really fall on the innovative. It can, but it falls more on the commitment, because you have a guy that just, or girl, because now the girls hit the lip harder than some of the guys. Let's just be honest. So you have a competitor that gets a wave and has all this speed and energy, and they have a nice section coming at them. Do you want to see them force a couple turns in between, or do you want to see them lay everything they can into that turn and show us that athleticism, that style, that approach that really makes you want to reward that? Like, wow, that's what we're here to do. Where you see another competitor maybe takes the road of, I'm going to try to fit more turns in because I think more is better. But sometimes less is more in surfing. And it all depends on the day too. Like we were saying, like we get up early, we look at it. If we can get a surf in before we watch you surf, That's really important, because you can set your scale. You can go, guys, it's really difficult out there to get a good section, and to get a combination out there, that's next level. So that helps. But also, like, I think it's important to bring these things up, because we always have this. I did 4 or 5 turns. I had the longest ride of the day. And we're like, we don't score. There's no length of ride in here. I just want to make that clear with everyone. There's no what we call LOR. Length of ride. I think they still kind of reward that in longboarding. I don't think it's called length of ride, but maybe use of wave, you know, completing a ride. And I'm a big fan on completions. Like, that's another thing that we could probably get into, Dave, with an innovative and progressive. 100%. Was that a clean ride out, or was that incomplete? And we argue it. Listen, we have a 5-man panel with a head judge, a priority guy, a spotter, an announcer, and we're all arguing, was that complete or not? So it's tough on us. So one thing I always try to tell every competitor, sell it to us. Make it look like you completed it. If you have to push through, pet the kitty, or whatever it's called, you know, whatever you want to call it, push through and sell that and kick out on your own. Looks like we have a question.
Yeah, and basically what she was asking, is there more scoring potential in the maneuver on the outside compared to the inside? I believe that was it.
That's a great question. But that's an amazing question, because that comes up at every event. That comes up at every tide change.
Or she said finish and maneuver, basically.
Okay.
And that's like putting a cherry on top.
I think the formula to really get a high good to excellent score is, in any beach break scenario, is a big turn on the outside, really nice fill in, however you want to call that. Fill in is what we call it, where it's just rail work or cutties, no hopping, and then come to the inside and spike the finish, like a big finishing turn. Now, what she's asking, I think, is more or less like, do you reward it more on the outside or the inside? Mm-hmm. That depends on the day. And it's one thing, like when I used to judge Huntington a lot, I would watch the guys that really committed to the outside turn, because everyone's going to get through and get that inside turn. So that made a difference at Huntington. Virginia Beach, there's not much scoring potential out the back sometimes, but the inside has that inside double up. So it does vary, and it does change. I'd hate to say heat to heat, but it does change tide to tide where you're going to reward. And we've done this, and Michelle can tell you from ESA championship days, where one of the competitors paddled way out the back, got a bigger set wave, more commitment, maybe more degree of difficulty, but had no maneuvers and stuff. So we have to kind of dissect the criteria, and hopefully we don't lose our competitors and people on the beach when we do this. But it does change, and you know this, Dave and Michelle and Joe. It can change with the wind, with the tide. You can have one heat where guys are getting barreled, girls are getting barreled. The next heat, they can't even get anything but a closeout. So I think that's an amazing question. I think we just have to take it case by case or day by day when it's like that. Yeah. But also, you know, we want to see, back to what we're saying, we want to see those, if we have commitment on the inside, commitment on the outside. I think it's harder on the outside to get to your feet and slam a big turn, but it's also kind of difficult to weave all the way through the trough into the shore break and spike a turn and ride out clean with your fins in dry sand, as we see every year in Virginia, you know? Yeah. That's just difficult as anything. And if you can pull that off and sell it to us, then it's good surfing to me.
Yeah, so what you're saying is where the scoring potential is variable depending on the conditions and the tide.
And the break, exactly. And the break, yeah. And that's part of the gray area with judging that we work under, because we can't, unfortunately, we can't go like WSL and go, oh, it just turned on shore. This will be the last heat of the day. Everyone bring your jerseys back. You know, we have to run some of these events. And when I do ISA, is another organization that I do, we have no wiggle room for anything. So it's like we run till dark. And if the conditions change, you might have been the lucky surfer in the morning that had clean conditions and offshore winds. And then in the afternoon, you close out straight handers. So as a surfer, you have to perform in all these conditions. And I think that's what makes champions, honestly. And we're harsh. I'm not going to lie. We're harsh with our scale when we have really high level in the water, shredders. You kind of have to be. That's one thing we can get into later. I think if there's any other questions about criteria, we can go there. But You know, I feel like that's kind of, it's pretty self-explanatory, but it also, like I said, there's gray areas. So we're here for you. That's another thing Dave will tell you, Michelle and Joe, be it myself, Dave, Jeff Klugel, Jeremy Sokol. We're here for you guys, the competitors and organizers more than anything. So if you see something, you have to go through the whole process. Maybe you go see Joe and I have a protest or I want to talk. I'd like to have a chat with the priority guy or a chat from, you know, the head judge when he has a chance, and we can do that. We have another question here.
Disqualification. I have seen competitors take off behind the peak in the foam ball and the surfer in front get a DQ and not get a DQ. Can you explain more? So this is more based on the...
That's priority. That's Dave's.
Yeah.
You know what's nice though, to tell Ron this, is what's really nice is when you're a judge and you have a solid priority guy. There's also, he can explain more than I can about it because he's more involved in it, but there's also situations at the beginning of the heat where there's no priority, that things like that can happen. Or that things, we'll just say they can create problems at the beginning of the heat when the priority hasn't been established that we have to look at and keep an eye on. But Dave can probably handle this better than myself.
Yeah, I think that's basically like for priority, that just is kind of how that works. I mean, like, so who has the higher and lower priority? Let me see, behind the peak and the foam ball. And the surfer in front gets the DQ. So basically the person that took off in the foam ball had higher priority on this kind of scenario right here. But I think for like without priority is what we're going to run into with the ESA. And basically if you're dropping in front of somebody that's already catching the wave, that is definitely an interference and going to be called. Somebody's calling out names.
I see that. I see Lenny. Oh man,
no need to mention names.
Yeah. We can go in there. That's funny. We can, those are the type of things, we'd have to review to even look over those type of things. Cause there could be another scenario that was at play on that kind of conditions and so on. But we are going to do a class coming up with interference. Jeremy Sokol will be joining us with that. And so we're going to be going over some types of things like that. And we can kind of maybe review that. If maybe you can send Michelle a message on that particular wave, I don't mind looking at it and seeing what we can see on it.
I think it's really important as you guys were talking about the wave scoring criteria and stuff to really think about, because the majority of the people on here are going to be at our local districts. And they're not going to be judging necessarily at Easterns or even at regionals. But so what can you tell them when they're judging a contest, a heat, and it's onshore and the waves are, it's a wind swell and it's like knee high, and how are they going to establish that criteria for the scoring? Because there might not be a lot of opportunity to do any kind of maneuver.
Well, it's a good question, Michelle. And that's what we deal with a lot on the East Coast. So I'd hate to say we have to be creative with the criteria, but we have to be a little bit more open with our scale for sure. And one of the things that we should do, like Bill Seitz had mentioned, when the conditions start to deteriorate, we all have a powwow. We almost have to hit the reset button. But as a new judge, like say you're starting out as a rookie judge, we'll call it, and you're all stoked in the morning when, like I said, it's offshore, everyone's getting barreled, it's easy to pick out the 8 5s and 9s. And then you get to that part of the day where everything looks the same. Everybody kind of is doing the same turn, so those are those little details that we have to pick apart and go, seems like this surfer had a little bit better rail work. And I think as a starting judge, you have to decide first off what you like. You have to be opinionated. You have to like something. And if you love surfing, and we're all big fans of surfing, you can see someone connect the dots on a wave and go, well, that was a good read, so I'm going to reward that read. Like they read the wave really well. They didn't have any big explosive maneuvers. I didn't see any fins or big spray, chunks coming out the back, but I thought that they read it well. So I'm going to reward that. And that's where inside your panel as a judge, you can help the panel sometimes. And you, as a head judge, you're going, okay, I have one judge that likes this wave, and I'm kind of liking it too because of the last wave we only gave a 3.5 for. You know, it had like one little soft turn. This had actually some speed, carried some, you know, flow, and had one nice little punctuated turn. So, and that's just kind of where we all work together. I want everyone to know that when you do judge, it's not Wizard of Oz. We're not behind a screen. He wins, she wins, that's it, done. It's not a perfect system, but we all work hard together, and we communicate. People ask us, do you talk about stuff? And we have to, because no one's perfect. And if you have a day where you're like, oh, it's that you've hit a wall and you're just like, you're looking at your head judge, and it's happened, right, Dave?
Yep.
Right, Joe? It's happened to all of us. You're
all
like,
day, 8 hours.
you're like, help me. What do I do here? Who wins this heat? I've got them all tied. I don't know what to do. And it all looks the same. And sometimes it's best just to go, you know what? It's a team up here. I have 3 people kind of liking red the best of the heat. I'm feeling it. And that's where we kind of have to organize and get together. And we have to be, and I'm going to say something, and I might get in trouble for saying this with some of my bosses, but we're a team up there. But you have to be honest to your competitors and tell them what you thought. Because I've gone down and said, you know what? I called the interference the other way, but I'm going to go with the team. And that's the way it worked out. And we have to. And it's like, you don't want to go down there and throw everyone under the bus. Oh, this organization, these people, these judges. No, you just sit up there and you give it 100%. And if you're that person that's willing to do that, stare into the glare, you know, maybe not the most well rested because you've done 4 days in a row of this event or something, you know, and you're exhausted, but you have to rely on your team. That's why I said, one of the first things I said when we started this was, the most important job as a head judge is picking the best panel you can. Pick that panel surfers and shredders and up and coming guys. And listen, one of the best judges I've ever worked with, and you know her, Tori Gokerson's a world champ longboarder. And she came out of nowhere and started judging with us, and we were like, wow. And this is where now we have Liz Hauser, we have her, and we have Cassie McLean, who I think she's watching, and she's an amazing surfer, an amazing judge, and we're really always excited to get her involved in any events. And I know that she holds her own judging and in surfing anywhere she goes. So, you know, we're working hard together up there to make sure that everyone's happy in the end, but it's not a perfect system, as you know.
Yeah. To Michelle's point earlier, when you talked about as the conditions deteriorate later in the afternoon, it's really helpful to let your panel know that they need to adjust their score and open it up and use the full range. And that'll keep them from getting in trouble with lots of ties and, you know, really reward the smaller differences when the conditions do deteriorate. And that'll help you get clarity.
And the key word is, you know, we compare a lot, and the benchmarks. We always judge from our benchmark waves and compare, do we like it better or less, and so on. And one thing you were talking about, Gordon, I liked when you were talking about the fillers. Big maneuver outside and the finishes, but inside, you know, working into the inside, all that filler. Like, we'll also see a lot of people hop in, and what we really look for in those fillers is a lot of rail work. And I think that's for amateur, like just trying to get that, is realizing not connecting hop, but using the use of the rail, cutbacks, wraps, and just all those types of things. That those are part of the nuances that you look at when developing your score that you're looking at. That's like, wow, that was better. He used or she used a rail to maneuver to the inside to do this instead of a hop. And those are just those little, that's a big difference, but just those nuances, punching through the lip or releasing on top of the lip, you know, those are the things we separate and so on. Which, Gordon, I guess that brings us into some of the next is really separating scores. Like, I know when I first started, you know, I not saying that I felt like this, but I would go in and, you know, sometimes I'm like, oh, I'll start off with a 3.8 when I first started judging. But one of the things you guys worked on, you know, we talked about was starting holes and halves in the beginning. And what this did was it gave us a solid benchmark as a team to start off with, because we might have a 4 and a 5 and a 4 or 5 right in the middle, which makes it a 4 or 5 average. Right. And, you know, just maybe cover some of that and how we differentiate that. I know, Michelle, you have a score sheet that you might be able to bring up that we can kind of maybe do some play with that and figure out how we do some scoring.
All right, cool. There's the sheet. So this is for 6-man, which we're still doing, Michelle. Just kidding.
Yeah, at the local district, yes, and regionals.
No, it's tough. But listen, this is how I started, and it is tough. It's tough for the surfers. It's tough for the judges, but this is how you have to do it. And I think it makes a better surfer in the long run. And when you do get to the 4-man heats, but looking at your score sheet here, it's pretty simple. And what Dave's saying is super important for us. If we start with a hole and half, say for red, we see red's first ride, and I'm going to go ahead and write my score 5-point ride. I'm going to put it in there. And the reason why I went 5 is maybe because I didn't think it was good surfing, this wave that I just saw, but I feel like it's better than low average. If you go to your, does it have a, can you scroll up, Michelle? Oh, there we go. So there you go. If you can see on the bottom left corner, you see poor ride, 1 to 2, fair, average, good, excellent. So we don't really say, what do you think, Dave? Was that poor? We don't use that term so much, but we do use average, and we use good and excellent all the time. And the reason why I'm saying 5, and this is just a perfect world, if you can start off with a 5 sometimes, and maybe I saw something there that didn't really get me in the good range, but I'm scratching at the good range. So you got your 5. You don't want to start with a 4.8. And there's a reason for that, because this is my first scale. So now yellow gets a wave, and I like it better. And I'm going to go 5. No, I'm going to go 6. I'm going to go 6 on yellow. I liked it that much better. I'm going to keep a point separation between red and yellow. So now white gets a wave and has the best single maneuver of everyone's rides, but then falls on the second. But I want to reward that white because I think it's better than red's whole ride, but not close enough to yellow's ride to jump. So I'm going to go maybe just 5-2. And this is where you start breaking your increments. I could have gone 5-5 up there, but I'm saving that 5-5 because there's going to be something. And this is just how we work in our head. I have it better than red, but I have it clearly separated from the 6 of yellow because I like 6 better, or yellow's 6 ride better, you know? So this is where we're talking about where it gets creative now. Now you have blue has a nice combination, but doesn't really have the finish that yellow has, and I'm going to go 5-5. So now we have no ties. If the heat ended just now and no one else got a second, or orange and green didn't catch a wave, you have first through fourth right there figured out. And if I went, and I see this a lot from rookie judges, 4-5 for red, 4-5 for blue, you know, and they just start writing the same scores, and you're like, well, what's the separation? You know, we can't throw those same scores. So we're going to go back and adjust this, and we're going to go, okay, which wave did you like the best out of all those? You've got all the same scores, so let's fix this. So the worst of it, we'll say, was white with a 4. And then you can keep your 4-5 on red because it's really similar to his first ride. But then this wave of blues should be somewhere in the middle. So there's your 4-3, 4-2, whatever. And this is how we get our heat scores at the end. And then orange waits till the last minute and drops a 10. I just wanted to throw a 10 in there because this was the best wave of the day and everyone agreed and the whole beach lit up. And Joe Grottola came up and asked us, you know, if it was unanimous, and it was. And so this is where Dave said a very important thing earlier about the use of scale. It's really easy to get a 4-5 and a 5 in a heat. It's almost impossible to get above a 7 from some people. And I've had judges that sit down with us and they're going, my scale ends at 7. So your scale ends at the bottom of a good ride. So you're not going to go above that? How come? Use your whole scale. So this is, I started with these average scores, and then I saw orange get the most amazing wave. So I jumped and gave it a perfect score. So this is kind of how we work every day. And we do little cues. Like Dave will tell you, this feels like Blue's first wave was way better than his second ride to me. That I still think Blue's first wave. So if someone came in and gave Blue's second ride a 5-8, but everyone else had it in the 4s, the only thing I would say, I don't tell that judge to change their score. That's not what we're there to do. all we do is give little cues like everybody else kind of felt like Blue's first ride was better. And I personally feel like that was better because of this, this, and this. And we have to give that description, that explanation. So this is what we work on all the time. We use wet erase markers so we don't have paper to worry about. And I carry these everywhere I go, and we use these on everything. And if you see it, it's just a laminated piece of paper with the colors on it. And this is for 4-man, but we can do 6-man as well. And we just split the boxes and do other things. But I think that's probably the best question yet, is like, how do we get someone to sit down and start throwing scores? I think if you just put the pin in their hand and let them go, and they know what surfing is, 9 out of 10 times, they're pretty spot on. It's when they overthink it. And then they start getting into and then they start worrying about what the judge next to them has. Or, you know, sometimes as a head judge, you're like, I like your score, but it needs to go in white. You know, you got it in orange, and I think that was white. And you know about colors, Dave. We could go for hours about calling colors.
Oh yeah, especially looking into the glare.
but you got to trust your panel, and you trust your crew, and you trust your contest organizers, and everyone's doing it for the right reason. So it's like, we're up there trying our hardest. And like we said earlier, we're, you know, none of us are making $1 million doing this, but we love it. And we have a family that's extended through the whole East Coast that I like. The memories with Joe, the memories we've already had, Dave, in the last 6 or 7 years, Michelle just taking the ESA and running with it. It's been amazing. So it's like, I would love to do more things with people on the beach with mock heats and judging and all that. But I think the future is the computer, how we're doing this now. And I like this. This is cool. We should do more of this for sure.
Yep. And I like, you know, when we talk about it, like with competitors, I think it's so important for them to go back and look at their score sheets to see really where the judges are throwing the scores. So, because, you know, and we brushed on this last week a little bit, was, you know, you can feel as a surfer when you're like, wow, that wave felt good. And then where did I fall on the scale? Where was I reaching on the criteria? How can I make that better for the next heat if I made it through the round into the next one? You know, it's those type of things are huge. And I like, you know, Gordon, one thing we talk about too with judges, since a lot of people will sit down for the first time judging, that it's working together as a team on the panel. And, you know, and sometimes, so if we have a 5-5 and somebody has a 4, it's our, let's say a 3-5, which is past our scale. Say if our scale that we're really trying to stay between is a 1-5 or so, a 1.5 on the wave scores. Like, how do you know, you're so good at doing that. Like, where does those adjustments happen? We don't bring the 2 top scores down. You know, so if 5 judges are in the higher level and 1 judge is at a 3-5, like you were saying, it's like, hey, what did you see? What was that? What, you know, was, and I talked about last week, it's recall. And that was the biggest thing that I learned when I've worked with you for the first time, and all that is being able to break down a wave that we saw that we consider the benchmark. We had the fortunate at the pro levels that we do not shift between U14 or
right. When
you
you're
know, to this division. It's all throughout the day. Conditions do change, but you know, as we're making changes from mini Huni to open, it's like a different, those criteria are going to change with those each divisions. But how do you handle bringing them up? Like, so if somebody does 3-5 on the 5-person panel, and then the rest are in the higher scale at the 5-5s and 6, you want them to still be able to hold their opinion as the low score if they can kind of articulate, correct? Like, this is what we
you do. You don't want the guy that's the lowest score 9 out of 10 times is getting tossed anyway.
Yeah, on a 5-person. Yeah,
on a 5-man heat.
Yeah,
5 scoring.
I mean, 5-person panel.
Yeah, 5-sitting panel. So say the score is that far out of the average that it's going to cause the computer not to let the whole average go through. It's a fine dance that you have with that person, because you don't want to shake their enthusiasm for judging. You don't want to lose this judge because you're calling them out, but you're trying to get into their head and go, what did you miss? Did you miss something? because I think this is better than that wave. Like I said, this to me, and I agree with the panel, this was blue's best wave, but you have the second wave the best. Can you explain why? 9 out of 10 times they don't try to debate it. They just go with it. But it can be a lack of concentration. It can be anything, but that's what we go back to the head judge, the importance, you know, working with the ISA, there's a real hands-off approach to head judging. We have really good replay, and they've put all their money and energy into replay and trying to figure this thing out. And it's been like a process for the Olympics that's coming up. And we don't get that to work like that on the East Coast as much. We're more rapid fire. We have to get that in. We don't have time for replay, nor do we really can utilize it on situations that, look, we're wind swell 9 out of 10 times, right? We're not 16-second New Zealand swell wrapping around, you know, it's fast fire, and it's super important. If you're a good judge on the East Coast, you can judge anywhere. And that I swear by. The people that can do it here.
That's a good point, yeah.
It's amazing, because I've seen people, you know, everyone that we've kind of came up with a crew has made it in international events. Jeremy's doing all kinds of big QSs now, primes, and Liz is doing CTs, and it's amazing to see our friends that we started with that have done ESA with us, and NSSA and ISA and Surfing America, and now doing these big, huge events around the world and going to these venues that we would love to go to. But you have to cut your teeth somewhere. So it's like, where better to do it than on the East Coast, where I tell you what really helped me was I got so used to the glare being a Floridian and doing stuff on the Outer Banks and doing stuff in Virginia. And we never got to work on south facing beaches, only in Montauk once every 5 or 6 years. So we're always, or maybe Rhode Island or somewhere. So we're always in the glare till 1 or 2 o'clock. And then in the afternoon, it's cooking the back of your neck. And you know, you have no-see-ums and mosquitoes and all kinds of wonderful things. And these are what makes us, you know, and when we get a chance to go to the big stage, and there's air-conditioned trailers that we're in with people bringing you sushi, and this is how the regionals are, by the way. I'm just kidding. But then we can really, when I, you know,
we have some pretty good food at regionals.
Yeah, no, I love Chick-fil-A. Don't get me wrong. So, but with that being said, I'm saying if you can do it here, it's kind of like the New York song. If you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. I'm going to be honest, because it's tough.
One of the things about training new judges at the district level is we won't put them on the panel. They'll sit to the side of some of our best judges.
Sure.
And when you know, they're about to put a score down, our judges will break down the ride and talk about why they gave it their score, and ask the training judge, you know, why they put down the score they put down. And, you know, after having them train on, you know, 4, 5, 6 heats, take a look at their consistency and see how consistent they were with the regular panel. And that really helps them in a lot of ways. And it's a way of bringing new judges and new talent up on the district level. And at the same time, it's helping their surfing, helping them understand the competitive strategy and why surfers get the scores they do in the heats, and seeing it from the other side.
No, that's a great point, Joe. Shadow judging is amazing. And I got a chance to do that a couple of times at some really big events where you sit next to these guys that you've admired, and the first wave is Mick Fanning, and you're like, like you don't know what to do. But that is a part of the process. It's important. And that's great that you do that at your local level, because these kids need that. They need to sit down and shadow judge and see how really difficult it is. And I think if parents and competitors were more involved with this process, they'd be not as quick to call people out. They'd realize how difficult it really is. And, you know, I say to competitors and parents all the time, yeah, you got here and you surfed a couple heats and left. We've been here since 6 a.m. We're not leaving until the speakers are off the beach, and, you know, so it's a long day, but you have to stay in the game. And like Dave Shipley, our buddy, was a CT judge forever. He says, stay in the game. And that's important for the young judges too. It's like, you might not have a good first. I left Santa Cruz one time, I think it was 08. And if Klugel's listening, he'd be mad at me, but I left that event saying, I'm done. I'm not judging anymore, because I had a terrible event. I didn't agree with anybody on some results. And I kind of hit the reset button when I came home and fought through it, and it made me a better judge. But you know, it's hard when you're a scoring judge and you see a result that you don't like or you didn't feel. And that's where I think that it's really hard surfing because it's so subjective. That's why we lean on that criteria. That's why we work together. That's why we talk it out. That's why, like Joe said, we have new judges that show some potential, sit down and shadow judge and really absorb what we're doing there. And being that head judge that's nice to people and not mean and calling people like, what is your score, Dave? 8.8?
8.8. That's what he calls me. We've had some great times with this, I think too with judging it's a commitment. And I brought up last week, Gordon, like my first time judging with you all, you called me up and you're like, hey, there's a spot in Belmar for the day, just one day. And it was the commitment I'm like, I'm going to do it because this is where I want to be. And, you're not going to be a perfect judge all the time, but like you came back, what you were saying, when you left with Klugel and all that stuff. And it's good. I roomed with Gordon once at the Outer Banks Pro. And I remember I was like, whoa, I don't think I had a good day. And he's like, well, Dave, I think you're being a little tough. How'd you say it? You're being a little tough on yourself. You had a really bad day or something. It was like, yeah. And I was like, yeah. But it's the honesty. It's for us to strive to be better. And I think that's the important thing, that's where the team comes in. When we finish up these events, it's a pride. It's good. The camaraderie and the family and just everything that comes together. But it's a commitment, and you got to leave your ego at the door. We are opinionated. We have opinions, but that's what makes the panel. And I think it's an amazing thing. And, for like even Gordon here being a head judge, he's had to go through every one of these parts, being the panel judge, doing this, starting off in the amateur, being wrong, being right. And what parts of the criteria develop this team. And as Gordon said, picking the right judges. And every single one of us might look at a wave and see something different. Oh, this had a lot of, power and flow, but I really didn't like how they bogged on the nose on this bottom, when they came out of it. And I think those are the things that bring the team together. And the more we work together as a team, it's funny how our scores all start to be in the same place. And we're not looking at each other's sheets. We're not doing this. We are actually focused on what we have. Gordon's a strong component of putting up panels between each other, so it keeps us focused. Yep, and it keeps us focused on it, not as much, because when you start hitting that wall in a tired day, it keeps you true to it. And I think that's an amazing thing. And that all falls into recall and so on. Yeah.
Well, I think it's also, and we're winding down too, so we want to answer some of these questions that are coming up. But I think it's important to note too, for the people that are watching this, is that some of you guys on here might be interested in taking it to the next level, like where Cassidy and Rob Kelly are, and going on to joining in our regional a panel of judges and maybe coming up to Easterns and judging. But there are a lot of people on here who just are strictly going to be doing it at the district level while their kids are competing or just want to help out. And I think it's really important to also tell them that it's not a huge commitment for them to step up and help us out. I mean, it's a commitment to be part of the district for sure, but we don't want people to think that it's a huge commitment and, it's going to take a lot of their time to do this. We want them to kind of get the basics of this and understand it. So when a judge on the 3-person panel at the district has to run and use the restroom for a heat, they can sit in and kind of help out and keep the day moving along.
Yeah. So then the commitment is really taking the tools that Gordon has explained today to kind of practice with understanding the criteria and score separation. And this will make your time sitting on the panel much easier and better to be a part of the team.
Yeah, I mean, we all love surfing. We all love it, and that's why we're there. And ultimately that's what it is. At the end of the day, we just want everyone to have a good, safe event and go out and rip.
Yep.
And if they get a trophy, they do. And if they don't, that's all part of life, right?
Yep. So where we're going to open up to the Q&A,
Okay.
Gordon, what is the tools of the trade to be a judge?
So I put together my little backpack of judging stuff. You always got to carry a little windbreaker for rain. I got a nice Patagonia one. That's my cherished raincoat. Carry a little UV lip balm because your lips get dry from yelling out. Oh, one thing Michelle had said earlier about new starting judges is get them to spot. Spotters are huge up on the tower. We rely on them, and that really was one of the best things I ever did to help me as a head judge was to spot events. Calling colors, that's it. Also, good pair of shades. Got to have a good pair of shades. Those guys that show up with the disco shades and they can't, and the glare's real bad, and they get sunburnt the first day, and then there's no good lenses. I'm like, yeah, you need, right, Dave? You need.
Yep. Made the investment. There you go. Yep, I made the investment, and yeah, it's funny. And then I had to break out the binoculars.
one thing I wanted to say too that we've really implemented, and I hope that Michelle, we do this too when we do future events, is I tell all my judges leave their phone. You can bring the phone on the tower, and when you have your 20-minute break, which everyone's going to have a break, get on your phone. I've noticed during football season, some of my best judges, I'm not going to say who, you know, Dave.
Yep.
They're like, oh, Jaguars just scored. You know, and I'm like, what? So it's really important for me when you're up there and you're working with me, it's not about social media or trying to, you know, text your friend or telling your buddy who's in the next heat. Major maneuvers, combinations are what they're looking for, you know? So that's one thing that I just wanted to put out there because I know everyone's attached to their phones, but we try to make a point. Like in Virginia, we don't touch them.
But speaking of that, Gordon, it is permissible for the competitors to talk to the judges prior to their heat and ask them what their criteria might be or what they're judging on that day, what they're looking for based on the
Absolutely. And I would, any event we do together, Michelle, if you wanted me to go in every morning and with my panel and we huddle down, we do this sometimes, right, Dave? We huddle down.
Oh yeah, 100%.
You guys kind of see there's a lot of, you know, a lot of wind today and there's a lot of chatter in the face. A person that's smooth all the way through and connects the dots and smashes every section, you know, that's what we should do. This isn't like I said.
I agree. Yep. And the last couple comps that we did together, Gorge, we did. You and I were down on the beach, and if any questions came up, we were there. And by being present down, you know, and out of the tent, I think it brought people closer to kind of look at it with us and do that. And again, I think that's one thing about judging that needs to happen more. It's just being very upfront and honest about what we're looking.
Well, yeah, that's our job. We're there just to, how do you say it, categorize surfing.
Yep.
Not there to create
Surf IQ that you brought up that makes good judges.
Yeah.
Yep. So
we have like 7 more minutes. I just want, if anyone has a question, please go ahead and put it through now. And while we're waiting for the questions to come through, Gordon, before you have to go, I want to ask, where is your favorite venue on the East Coast to judge?
Ooh, I'm really partial to Sebastian Inlet. Just one of my favorite places. I love it down there. But can we consider Barbados part of the East Coast? It's our region.
Sure.
Sioux Bowl's my favorite.
Yeah.
But I do love Cape Hatteras. I love everything about the Outer Banks. It's just something special there. And like I said, I owe that to Joe and Lisa and my friends in Florida bringing me there when I was a kid. And I had my ESA glory days. I had that one result. Next time we do this, I'm going to show you guys. I got in the final with Todd Klein and Dave Spear and Paul Reinecke one day.
Nice.
Down here.
Yeah. So, hey, Gorge. There's a good picture of Gordon right there.
There we go.
Yep, that's Gordon surfing.
That was at the USA Surfing Championships 2017.
We have a question from one of our directors down in North Central Florida, Jason Eastwood. Are waves of consequence like pipe or chopes harder to judge than a wave like lowers on the CT level?
It's a really good question. I feel like waves of consequence are so much easier to judge. I've been fortunate enough to judge in Puerto Escondido. not the big wave tour, just QSs. And it's strictly who takes off the deepest, who gets barrel the longest. And that is the easiest type of event to score to me. The hardest is Virginia Beach. It is. It's one of the hardest. And there's a lot of reasons for that, because the waves are really similar. The surfing all starts to look the same. There's no big barrel sections with guys getting spit out of barrels. So yeah, that's a great question, actually. I think it's easier. I know guys, I've never judged pipeline, but all my friends do. And they tell me that it's the easiest event to judge ever. It's 2s or 10s.
Yeah.
And
here's another this is a great question for the ESA. Do you modify the criteria for younger surfers? So we still have varying age divisions, obviously. Do you change your criteria for each division?
well, sure, you adjust for the youth, because obviously what the men are doing and the women in open, it's another level. Their strength, their power, their ability to generate speed. And the kids, now listen, now with that being said, the little kids that we have now, the youth coming up, rip. So we don't just give them gifts. It's not, that kid's cute, the cute and cuddly factor, we call it sometimes. We don't really do that. It's these kids shred now. And I mean, I can think of a million young kids now that are coming up through ESA that rip. And when you watch these kids surf, it's not like you're giving them gifts. You do adjust. You just don't adjust. You don't over adjust, we'll say, because they're ripping. There's no doubt about it. But you will, a U12 heat, you'll announce it, or if it's a juniors heat or a boys, you want to know your division that you're scoring. When you get to the open and everyone's against each other, like you brought up Cassidy beating all the boys in New Jersey, then it's a free-for-all, and it's like the little kids can win. How many super heats did Kelly Slater win back in the day, Joe?
Oh, countless. Probably every one he entered, except for maybe one or two.
And he was what, 12, 13?
Yeah. But basically at the district level, we amplify the scores for the younger surfers. So that helps break it up a little bit, and it helps eliminate ties. And it just gives them a clearer picture of how they're performing relative to the other competitors in the heat.
Okay.
Yep.
Trying to get the light better, you guys. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. You're fine. Another question was, can you go over and give a better description of benchmark when scoring a heat? That was from our director up in New York.
Sure. So our benchmark score would be either, it doesn't have to be the best wave of the day as our benchmark. A benchmark, like Dave and I were talking about, could be a person has like a good benchmark to maybe go over is an air, because we'll compare aerials the whole day. So you have this one air, you're like, that's the best air we saw. That's your benchmark. That's only came a 7.5, remember. Now, if that person gets not as good of an air, but has another turn, then it can jump it. But barrels, we do the same thing. That's not the best barrel of the day. Remember so-and-so's barrel? That's our benchmark. And we do that for every competitor, and we do that for every heat. Like, that's yellow's best by a mile. We all agree there. And you use those benchmarks to kind of help you score and figure out your right result.
Right.
One of the things I wanted to point out, Gordon, is that every heat on the East Coast, with the conditions changing so much, is a reset. So you could basically be slightly adjusting your scale every heat, and you set a benchmark within the heat, not necessarily, doesn't necessarily have to be a benchmark that extends to the next heat.
Oh, no.
It's just within that heat in that time period.
No, 100%. That's exactly how we work. And it does change. Like you said, you have to hit the reset button sometimes twice in a heat, because you started off too low and you're like, listen, no one's getting above, you've seen it, but no one's getting above a 3-point ride here. And we're being too harsh. We have to open up. And so you have to do that. And you have to talk. That's the importance of having a head judge, and good contest directors come up too sometimes and be like, hey, what are you guys doing? No one can get above a 3. What are you guys, falling asleep? Do you need me to get some sugar on the panel or some coffee? So it's like, yeah, we all work together in this, but you're right, Joe. You have to sometimes heat to heat. You have to take it that way. Yeah. It's crazy. It's definitely challenging.
So one last question, and then we'll close for the night. Is someone asked why doesn't each district have paid judges? And I think all of us on the panel wish that every local district would be able to pay their judges. However, the ESA is a nonprofit and it's volunteer driven. And there are a lot of districts that don't have the funds to pay judges. But there are some districts that are extremely, they have a lot of members and they are able to. But Joe, I'm going to turn this question over to you to answer real quick, because you know how it's been for the last 50 years.
Yeah, well, I know our time's winding down, but first of all, paying a judge doesn't ensure that they're going to be a good quality judge. That being said, there's a lot of benefits you can get from volunteering to judge 4 or 5 heats during the course of the day. And you're going to benefit yourself from improving your competitive strategy. So ideally, we'd like to have the best judges available, and we'd like to compensate them in some way or another. If you're wondering why you're not being paid, maybe you could talk to your district director about maybe finding ways to raise some funds for the district so the district can afford to compensate judges. And yeah, it's great that you can do something to compensate your judges through monetary means. And you got to keep them fed, you got to keep them in the shade, and maybe throw some swag their way, and you want to make them happy.
Yep.
Thanks, Joe.
And Michelle, here was just one real quick. They missed session 1. Will there be a makeup? Do you have those recordings of that, or are those anywhere else? Yeah.
We are going to post all of the webinars after we run through the whole season.
Awesome.
So with that, we're going to close. It's 2 minutes after 8. We're close to 8 o'clock. I want to thank you guys. Thank you, Gordon, for joining us. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. I hope you guys are leaving here with a lot of useful information. And one last question, Gordon, for you before we go. You gave us your favorite venue on the East Coast. What's your least favorite venue?
New Smyrna Beach.
New Smyrna.
New Smyrna Beach.
And
we'll just sum that up in one word: sugar sand.
All right, guys. Everybody have a wonderful week, and we look forward to seeing you live on Thursday. We have Todd Holland with Jason.
Yeah, Crowbar.
Yeah.
So that'll be a good one.
Yeah. Thanks, Gords. Thanks, everybody.
See you later.